But like what we also spoke about last week, we find that now, more than 20 years later, Africa is still plagued with suboptimal development. If anything, Africa is regarded as one of the most corrupt continents. So the African Renaissance, in many ways, has not managed to achieve its intended goals of seeing Africa developing, of seeing African people, their welfare being improved. If anything, poverty has continued to plague Africa. And I believe one of the reasons why this is so, one of the reasons why we find that Africa continues to be plagued by corruption, continues to be plagued by suboptimal development, is because the African Renaissance itself, and indeed as many other initiatives, they've sought to address the African problem at the behavior level. So the emphasis and the focus has been on the behavior of African leaders. So you find that the Renaissance itself sought to address the limitations and the evils that characterized the behaviors of African leaders. And now, like what we spoke about last week, you find that this is not the best approach, because behaviors are only informed by values and attitudes. And these are in turn informed by beliefs, the worldview, which is religion and culture. So if we were going to see a turnaround in the fate of Africa, rather than focusing on the behavior, I think there's been so much talk about the consequences. There are many narratives that have been built over the years of the consequences of Africa's bad leadership. You talk about Africa being labeled a dark continent. You talk about the paradox of Africa. Those are all different narratives that speak to the consequences of the behaviors of the African people. But if we are going to see different narratives, if we are going to see Africa taking a different trajectory, as I believe Africa needs to do in the 21st century, then we also need to be more deliberate about addressing the values, the attitudes, and the beliefs and worldviews of the African society. So it's very important that we look at the religious aspect of the African society post-colonialism and how that has impacted the worldview of the African person post-colonialism. All right, so the beliefs and the worldviews, they help us to answer these three critical questions. What is true? Who are we? And what is important? So as we address or as we reflect on our religion as Africans, we get to understand what is true, who we are, and more importantly, what is important for us as a people. Then the values and the attitudes help us to answer these two critical questions. What is good or best? And what do I do what I do? Why do I do what I do? So we get to appreciate and to be able to set the rules of engagement per se, as far as our conduct and as far as our behaviors are concerned. Then ultimately this will inform now what is done, our behaviors. And we believe, and I believe, as we go through this process, even the result will also change.